Welcome to Who's Who in a ScriptEd Foundations classroom lesson. This is the third and final video in the ScriptEd training series. If you're an advanced class volunteer, this video is not for you. Please make sure you watch the Who's Who in an advanced class video instead. If at any point you have questions during this presentation, please jot them down and submit them along with your exit ticket at the end of this video. By the end of this lesson, teachers will be able to explain the unique and shared responsibilities of the lead and support teachers on a ScriptEd volunteer team. Really briefly, before we dive in further, ScriptEd offers courses during the school day and after school. The major difference between in-school and out-of-school are timing and attendance. In-school classes are usually shorter and have a more consistent rate of student attendance because students are enrolled and their participation in class results in a grade. Out-of-school classes are longer, about 90 minutes, and students elect to attend, so are often very invested in learning. Each has their own set of challenges, and it's important to recognize that we're speaking in broad strokes here, so not everything will be applicable to everyone. In all ScriptEd classrooms, we attempt to place teams of 4 volunteers. Each week, on a rotating basis, one of those volunteers is the lead teacher, while the other 3 are support teachers. Also, in ScriptEd classrooms, you'll find a program manager who is a ScriptEd staff member who is there to support you, and a school liaison who is our formal connection to the school. As the name implies, the lead volunteer teacher is responsible for internalizing the lessons from the ScriptEd curriculum and preparing for the class, sharing the plan with the team, delivering the lesson to students, and leading a volunteer teacher debrief after the lesson. Support teachers are responsible for providing feedback before a lesson, modeling positive behavior for students, helping students during work time, and taking care of classroom logistics like attendance and grading. We'll touch on all of those responsibilities in greater detail in just a minute. ScriptEd program managers all have prior experience as classroom teachers and wear many hats, all designed to ensure a smoothly running program and positive experience for students and volunteers. Program managers are the primary go-between for the school, students, and volunteers. They communicate with the school to ensure technology is working, and we are aware of any schedule changes that will affect the program. They work with students to collect paperwork, remind them about program-wide events, and stay on top of attendance and behavior. Program managers also organize and guide volunteer team meetings, facilitate the Slack communication to ensure volunteers are successful in planning and preparing for lessons, etc. In class, you can expect program managers to provide real-time coaching and modeling to help you grow in your role as a teacher. The school liaison role looks different at each of our school sites, but their primary role is to be our on-the-ground contact at the school and provide support wherever we most need it. School liaisons support with student attendance issues, behavior management, grading, and printing materials. They provide announcements from the school and will help with coordination of field trips. Some ScriptEd classes take place during a 5-day in-school elective class. At these schools, the school liaison will lead lessons on non-ScriptEd days that support instruction happening during ScriptEd days. At other schools, particularly after school, a liaison might only pop in occasionally when they're able. All right, as promised, let's look even closer at the roles you'll be taking on in the classroom. That of the lead and support teacher. First, the lead teacher. The first responsibility of the lead teacher is lesson prep and internalization before all lessons. ScriptEd has a robust lesson-by-lesson curriculum already created, which lives on GitHub. It's critical that you internalize the lessons you will teach before you are standing in front of a group of teenagers. Successful internalization requires reading through the slides, reading all the teacher notes, clicking on every link, and doing all the activities as if you were a student. These actions will ensure that you are prepared and ready to teach. Now that you've internalized, you'll need to share that information with your team so that everyone is on the same page. To do this, share on Slack the following pieces of information with your team. What's the objective of the lesson? What will be difficult for students? And where do you need support from your volunteers? Now it's time for class. As the lead teacher, you are responsible for delivering instruction. In order to be the best lead teacher, you need to be there early to set up and prepare for student arrival. You are in charge of teaching the content and making that content fun and engaging so that students feel excited to learn. You're also in charge of asking for help when you need it. And that's why we have a team. The final responsibility of the lead teacher is guiding your team through the debrief process after a lesson has taken place. After class, share your thoughts about what went well during the lesson, what you covered, including what you didn't get to that was on your plan, and what you do differently. Seek feedback from your teammates and get input on areas for improvement. All right, now let's talk further about support teacher responsibilities. Support teachers should review the lesson ahead of class and give feedback when necessary. During class, they model positive behaviors for students when the lead teacher is teaching, actively paying attention to the lesson and asking clarifying questions when something might be unclear. They should keep an eye on students and work to re-engage anyone who might not be focused. During independent work time, support teachers are working with individuals and small groups to provide support and guidance. While the lead teacher is giving an instruction, you might be tempted to think that you are off duty. You're not. Remain actively engaged. There's always something to do to help move the lesson along. Please stay off your phone. It sets a bad example for students who aren't allowed to use their phones, and it shows them that you're prioritizing work over the short period of time you have with them. Also, circulate. Don't stay in one spot. Be moving around the room, looking for opportunities to support the lead teacher or students. Now, we're going to learn about more responsibilities shared by lead and support teachers that require clear communication with your team ahead of class. First up, zoning. Zoning is the process of dividing the room into equal sections, one for each volunteer. Students will sit according to a seating chart, and each volunteer will be working with one group of students for a predetermined duration, like quarterly, etc. Zones should stay consistent for a meaningful duration so that effective routines can be built and strong rapport can be developed within that group. Zoning the room makes working with a large group of students more manageable. If every volunteer tried to see every student every day, it's inevitable that some students would be missed and teachers wouldn't be clear on who received the support they needed. With zones, each volunteer is responsible primarily for a small group and can effectively monitor check-ins to make sure all students are well supported. Students get to know their assigned teacher well and build positive, close relationships. So everybody wins. Another benefit of zoning is that you've created easy to identify groups for group work or pairing. Zones will be adjusted with some regularity so that all teachers get to engage with all students and vice versa. Splitting up the room can be an interesting task. Let's try zoning a few rooms together. Where would you assign zones for this room? We would put the zones here in order to limit the amount of movement each volunteer has to do. All right, how would you zone this classroom? This might be a good structure so that volunteers are not crowding one another and can have good visibility of student screens. One more. Where would you put the zones here? We might zone the room this way. That's not the only way though. We could also have zoned by rows or in another way that would be more conducive to teacher support. Another responsibility that is shared among the team is attendance taking. All volunteer teams are required to keep up-to-date attendance records for their classes. This is an important accountability metric for our funding, and it allows you to keep track of student participation and learning. Teams should develop a routine of recording attendance either during class or just after it ends. All attendance records are due by 3 p.m. on Friday. Paper attendance should be taken and will be kept in a binder in the classroom. This is our backup, so that if attendance never makes its way onto the attendance app, you have a way to check. We also have a Salesforce app our volunteers use to take attendance. Your program manager will have more instructions about logging in and using it. We expect the volunteer teams grade exit tickets and projects and enter those grades into a scripted gradebook. Exit tickets are a quick 2 to 3 question check at the end of every class to see if students understood the material from the day. Projects take place at the end of most units as a cumulative review of concepts learned throughout a unit. Grading these items will allow teachers to have a strong understanding of where students are successful and where they still need help. It's important to give students feedback on their progress in the class as well. Exit tickets are graded by the person who's leading the lead teaching next class. This is so that the person who is lead teaching will know what students learned and what they were unsure about, so they can plan accordingly. Take a look at this first arrow. The grading guide at the top of the page. The grading guide is at the top of the page, and there is a column for every exit ticket. You put in the date. The gradebook automatically calculates the class average here. Under the objectives is the class average for each point in the rubric. There is also a section for comments. Each volunteer will be responsible for reviewing projects of the students in their zone and inputting grades into the gradebook. Once all grades have been submitted, your program manager will send out final graded rubrics to students. This should be done within 1 week of project submission. Each project has its own tab in the gradebook. On the top left, you'll see a description of the project and a link to the project rubric. The objectives are listed to the right along the top. Under the objectives is the class average for each point in the rubric. There's also a section for comments there. Each volunteer will be responsible for reviewing projects of the students in their zone and inputting grades into the gradebook. Once all grades have been submitted, your program manager will send out final graded rubrics to students. This should be done within 1 week of project submission. We recognize there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to roles and responsibilities in the classroom. We've created a resource to help you keep track of it all, called the Volunteer Dashboard. Each team will have their own volunteer dashboard with all of the important information and links your team needs to be successful. Let's talk through it. Important announcements and events are highlighted at the top. The next section is your focus area for the week. Your program manager will update this section weekly based on what they see as needs for your team. Any important announcements about the class will live here. The planning section has all the important links you'll need to complete any planning and preparation for your team. Student data highlights some of the important pieces to keep track of student data, like the gradebook, project submissions, and the seating chart. At the bottom are some info about the school and your team in case you forget. The links at the bottom are important resources. The Resource Hub is updated monthly with a particular feature. Check it out often. On page 2, you'll see the steps required for planning and preparing for teaching. Step 1, review the lesson you will teach in GitHub. Make a copy of the slides into your team folder. When you make a copy, add the name of your school at the end. This ensures that your copy and the master copy don't get confused. Step 2, edit the slides and update the daily session document. Step 3, send out the slides and the daily session document to your team via Slack at least 24 hours before class with answers to the following questions. 1, what is the objective of the lesson? 2, here are the parts I think will be difficult for students. 3, here's what I need for you. And 4, remind the team who's on attendance and exit ticket duty. After your team gives feedback, go ahead and make edits based on the feedback and print class materials. That's step 4. Again, this resource is meant to be a one-stop shop for your planning and preparation. Your program manager will get you connected to this resource as part of your onboarding process. All right, that brings us to the conclusion of this presentation and the end of our volunteer training series. Thanks for learning about the different roles and responsibilities in the Script Ed classroom. Please complete your exit ticket listed on the volunteer training videos document, and make sure you submit any lingering questions there as well. Welcome aboard.